Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Welcome back to the Blockchain Show, episode 231. It's my pleasure to welcome Phillip Shoemaker. Phillip, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ethan. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how we got here, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to discuss some of my favorite topics. You know, I was born and raised, I was lucky enough to be born and raised in Silicon Valley, in Cupertino, birthplace of Apple, et cetera. And my very first job right out of high school was as a software engineer at a startup called Symantec. Now that just kind of dates me. Symantec is far from a startup now, but it was when I joined. And I was going to college full time and just graduated from high school. I joined as a software engineer. And I was lucky enough to be able to go from startup to startup for quite some time. I think I've worked at, if you count Identity now, 9 different startups in Silicon Valley. And but along the way, I dabbled in, I was a software engineer. I did user interface design. And then I started running businesses, right? I ran the real networks business called Rhapsody, at least a certain division of it. And then ultimately I went to a AI startup called Numenta that is trying to reverse engineer how the cortical protocol works, how your brain actually thinks. But while I was there, I got my hands in 2008, I got my hands on an iPhone and just fell head over heels, thought that was the coolest thing. So I started playing around writing apps. And the process was so onerous and terrible. And the response, the customer service from Apple was wretched, that I started writing note after note about how bad it was and explaining what they could do to fix it. And next thing you know, I got a call from Eddie Q, the head of iTunes. And next thing you know, I was in a room with Steve Jobs and the rest of the executive staff interviewing me to head up the App Store team. So in 2009, I joined Apple. Built out the App Store, built the team that reviews all the apps. So we were the gatekeepers, the curators of the store, if you will. And I did that for about 7 years. I wanted to do that until we got review times down to 1 day. When I joined, it was 3 weeks. You submit an app on Monday, and 3 weeks later you get rejected. That was the big problem, and I wanted to fix all those problems because it was a time in the world. It was 2008, 2009, the housing crisis. There was a lot of people out of work. A lot of my friends who were software engineers had no way to make money other than creating some website or something along those lines. And I found the marketplace is a great way to democratize content, to be able to get anybody to be able to submit apps and see how they work in a merit-based way. That was valid for a while. And I really enjoyed my time at Apple. But I found while I was there, in 2010, a friend sent me the Bitcoin white paper that's on my wall behind me. And I was just enamored. To me, that was one of the greatest things I'd ever read. The idea, the promise of digital cash, of digital currency, but more importantly, this blockchain aspect just had me kind of spinning for a while. So I started investing in a few blockchain companies. BitGo was one of them. Balaji's company, 21E6 was another one. And but I still was, I'm still working at Apple. And while I was doing that, I realized that my Web3 or crypto ethos didn't really jibe with what I was doing at Apple. I was the man at Apple, right? I was blocking apps. I was, ultimately I got outed. I wouldn't say pseudonymous, but nobody knew what my role was at Apple. And once they found out, David Copperfield, of all people, outed me by a tweet. And when that happened, I blew up. I got raked over the coals in the press. I had people stalking me, death threats, people waiting for me, et cetera. So for me, privacy was something that was critical once I left Apple in 2016, when I got the times down to 1 day. And I wanted to do something Bitcoin and blockchain related, but just didn't know what it was. And it was in 2016, I went to Dominican Republic. My wife and I were learning to kite surf, and all our friends from the crypto industry just started showing up in this small town called Cabarete, and started convincing me that Bitcoin and blockchain and crypto was the way to go, and I should start playing around with ICOs, et cetera. And that's when I really started drinking from the fire hose and took the red pill and jumped in all the way, because to me, it was just a whole new world. And it was more along the lines of my ideals, my what I'd always looked for. I'm kind of an anarchist by nature. I don't like being told what to do. And so for me, it was the Wild West. And I like the Wild West. The internet early days were the Wild West as well. No rules, no regulations. But with that comes the requirement to regulate yourself. Otherwise, the government will step in and regulate us. So I decided to jump into identity once I met Civic and Vinny at Civic. We decided to spin off identity as a separate entity. And so that's what I did in 2019. We spun identity.com out of Civic as a protocol, a decentralized identity protocol nonprofit. And I've just been building the team since then. And now that we got an engineering staff, we're plugging away with white papers and our protocol. So it's kind of it in a nutshell.
That's the greatest introduction I've heard in like the last 6 years.
Thanks, Stephen.
That's amazing, man. Felt like I was watching a documentary or something about the history of so many things that I love. You have an incredible life, man.
Thank you. For me, the funny thing at Apple was early on when, I had managers on my review team coming to me and saying, "Hey, should we support this Doge app? This new Doge app just came out. It's a new type of cryptocurrency." And I asked the team, it's like, okay, well, let's figure out how we know these are safe, right? Which one is okay? What of these apps? And they just started making up ridiculous rules on how many people were using it or what the network effects were of it. It's like, they're missing the point. It was all to me about security, about what chain it used, et cetera. But the team knew nothing, so we were creating arbitrary rules about things we knew nothing about. And for me, I kept stepping back, saying, "Look, we are the wrong people in the world to be making these decisions because we don't know." And my team knew nothing about crypto, and that got me in beginning thinking early on. It's like, okay, Apple, the App Store is too big for Apple. We need something to manage it outside of Apple. And now I'm all about the DAO. To me, App Store should be run by a DAO. It shouldn't be run by Apple, right? We should let the developers and the users of the App Store decide what's allowed into the App Store or not. It shouldn't be some arbitrary company because they hold the keys to 50% of the phones used in America. And if everybody gets their news off of the phone, well, then that's kind of a stranglehold on news. And so for me, DAOs are everything. And yeah, I was involved early on, and that kind of got me frustrated because I wanted to fix the problem. I didn't want to be the problem, and that's part of the reason why I ultimately left. And I have every time I talk about Apple, I get a cease and desist because they don't want me talking about some of this stuff. But I think it's important. I think we really need to fix that. But we're not here to talk about Apple. But I do talk a lot about Apple.
Yeah, that's all right. I love Apple. So I've always wanted to meet Steve Wozniak. He seems like a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, Woz is a good guy. Strange. I didn't have a lot of interaction with him. I had more interaction with SJ, but those were scary times interacting directly with Steve.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, I'll try not to talk about Apple too much. I love your idea about a DAO being in place to kind of regulate all that. I think that back in like 2017, the DAO or the DAO, that it kind of got a bad name when the hack happened. But when I thought about it, it's like, actually, it worked. It did what it was coded to do. It was just a human exploitation of an error. If anything, it should just rebolster our confidence. Like, okay, well, let's make sure that do it right the first time. It's critical, because it's going to do what you tell it to do. Instead we had the Ethereum fork and basically, change in history, which is crazy to think about. But I'm interested just to learn a little bit more about identity.com.
I talk a lot about identity as well. To me, identity is it's kind of my love right now. I believe the original reason I wanted to get into identity is when I was running the App Store at Apple, what I found was that developers could come in under an email address and a credit card. They could create an app, right? Because they have to join the program. But that could be a prepaid credit card. So you really have no identifying information about these developers, right? So they submit an app, and maybe the app violates one of the minor guidelines, or maybe it violates something really egregious, like, let's say, pornography or child pornography, right? Something that not many people can argue that it's a bad thing, right? So they put that in the App Store. We pull it down, report them to the FBI. But what do we report to the FBI, right? We're required by law to, so we report their credit card number and their email address, right? Now, how easy is it to derive who that person is based on that? It's almost impossible, especially if the credit card is a prepaid card. So to me, that was one of the issues that we had, because developers would submit something egregious. We would terminate their iOS development program membership, their IDP membership, and then they'd come in a matter of minutes under a different name, a different credit card, submit the same app but different, different lipstick on it, so it looked a little bit different. The team is a massive team of people reviewing it. It doesn't mean it's going to go to that same person if there's 400 people reviewing apps, right? So it goes to a different person, they approve the app, and then we're stuck with that same problem in the store. So it's a colossal game of whack-a-mole, right? You're constantly hitting some, but that same person will reappear in a matter of minutes under a different one. People have it down on how to game the App Store. And that was really frustrating for me. So when I left, between that and all the privacy hits that I kept getting with regard, people would stand by my car at night waiting for me to come out of the office to convince me to approve their app, right? Something that it was just crazy. And so I didn't want people to know my address. I didn't want people to know all of our privacy, private information about us. So it got me thinking a lot about how to solve this problem. One, I wanted to be able to identify somebody online, but two, I didn't want to create honeypots of information, right? These are the honeypots. I say this all the time, but it seems like every couple of weeks, Marriott sends me another note saying that that they've had another hack, or somebody, right? One of the banks. People get hacked all the time, because if you got millions of identities in a database somewhere, that's a honeypot, right? Every hacker wants to get access to that information and then sell the data. And to me, that's the reason to get rid of honeypots, right? Nobody, Balaji says the government shouldn't require us to store something we cannot protect, right? And to me, how do you protect this stuff? If it's in a honeypot, if it's a massive amount of data, you can encrypt the hell out of it. You can do so many things, but there's always ways in. I think that's the concern I have. So let's eliminate honeypots completely. And that's why decentralized identity is important. So what we do at Identity, we created this company. The mission was to create a self-sustaining identity marketplace where people will come in and say, I want an identity, a developer on one end that needs to identify users. And on the other end, you have identity providers that will validate it. We're the protocol in between. We don't do either one of those, right? We are the protocol to get it on chain, to take your off-chain, we'll create off-chain credentials and make them available on-chain. And I'll go into more of that. But we wanted to create this self-sustaining identity marketplace, which means it's got to make enough money that both sides are happy, and we've got enough we're a nonprofit, right? So we're not out to make money. We just want to keep the lights on, right? We want to be able to do that. And so for me, I want to create a self-sustaining marketplace to create decentralized digital identities and reducing the overall centralized storage. I want to get rid of honeypots. And so that was our mission when we started in 2019. We wrote a big narrative on this, on how people could use it to track all kinds of things, including COVID credentials and others, to ensure that you're vaccinated or not, or whatever information you want to be able to hold. But to me, the key piece of it is you get identified, and maybe that identity is stored somewhere on, ideally it's stored on your phone, and you have access to it. If somebody needs information to it, they request it from you, and you accept the request and say, yes, Chase Bank, you can have access to my social security number and all this other information because I'm applying for a loan. But if Ethan here asks, if you ask me for my social security number, I'll say no, right? It's just a simple request. We know who's requesting the information. and we have to put it in context and figure out what they're going to do with it, and we make a decision. And if the decision is no, they don't get it. And that's the core concept of self-sovereign identity, and that's something that we're big believers in. So we've created this protocol called the Gateway Protocol, which allows dApp developers to say, "Hey, I need some sort of identifying information from this user." Now, some users of our protocol, like Civic, they use it for bot detection. They're not doing a full KYC, a full document scan. They're just doing bot detection, make sure you're human. Maybe they're determining you're unique, right? Now, unique is an interesting thing, because if you look at NFT drops and those things, they want to do one drop per person. And the way they do it now, for the most part, is they do one drop per wallet. But I don't know how many wallets you have. I have, I don't know, 15 or something, at least. I mean, how many paper wallets do I have as well? So many wallets. And so I could get 15 NFTs that way. And the goal by this NFT provider or creator was one per person. So Civic has added some information in the protocol to be able to allow uniqueness, right? To determine that there's only one Ethan. You can only get that NFT once. I can only get it once, et cetera. Regardless of whether you identify yourself on one account with your passport, and another account with your driver's license, and another account with your California or your state ID card, they'll be seen as the same person. And that's kind of a really interesting use. But other use cases are decentralized exchanges, right? With the Financial Action Task Force travel rule, we need to have some sort of PII travel with each transaction. So there are times when you need the KYC. We're the guys in the middle. We're providing all this technology, and we're allowing you to do with it what you will. For me, the big thing is taking a step away from KYC and focusing more on reputation. And one of the things that people want, like NFT creators want to know when they're issuing an NFT is, okay, I'm about to give you an NFT. What are you going to do with it? Right? And so they want to look at your history and determine, is this a hodler? Are you going to hold on to this NFT, or are you a flipper? Right? Are you going to flip it right away for as much money as you can? And some of these NFT folks are good with either, and others are like, we only want the people that are going to hold it. Right? The Bored Ape Yacht Club folks, right? The Yuga Labs folks, they love when people hold onto their apes, and because it helps build that kind of self-sustaining community that they have right now. And to me, we want to be able to provide people with all sorts of reputational data as well, so you can make these determinations on what type of person this is. It's kind of like the FICO score, right? What is this person's NFT score? And those are all types of technology things we're working on, because we also believe that reputation is key to provide pseudonymity, right? To allow people to be pseudonymous in Web3, which, we know a lot of NFT, look, Satoshi, right? We know that's a pseudonym. And there have been so much history of pseudonyms in the crypto space that we want to make it more official. We want to be able to allow you to put some skin in the game, put some reputation behind it, so you're not just an unknown entity.
Well, I love what you said about pseudonymity, because when I think about Bitcoin, that was kind of a crucial element to build trust. Yeah. As time went on, there has been different projects who tried to kind of eliminate the pseudonymity and make it truly anonymous, which are kind of interesting. The different, off-chain type systems. There's a lot of ways to go about it. Sparked a lot of debate. What's a true blockchain? I didn't really get into those conversations. It was kind of like, well, let's focus on what works and just explore it all, at least on this podcast. But I'm kind of curious to hear your take on that. Maybe you could expand a little bit about, the importance of your method and why you kind of arrived at that.
Yeah, for me, I got really, one of the things I loved about the internet early on was the anonymous nature of it, right? You could even if you want to say I heard somebody say Web 0 recently to refer to like bulletin board systems from back in the day that you dial up into. And then Web 1 was obviously these static websites. But for me, it was always about anonymity, right? Being able to go to any website you want with nobody tracking you. You could go wherever you want. You could learn about whatever you want. And again, nobody was watching what you were doing. That to me was really compelling to me, because it also gave you the ability for freedom of expression, being able to go out there and just say what you felt without anyone knowing who was truly saying that, right? And to me, it's not that I wanted to do death threats or anything like that. Believe me, I've had enough of those in my life. That it was more about just being able to say political views. And I remember when I was in college, and my political views would be different from friends around me, and the arguments you'd get into, and you're just trying to find like-minded people, right? To try to interact with, but just views on anything. I think freedom of expression requires a certain amount of anonymity or even pseudonymity. And to me, the difference is simple. Anonymity cannot be traced back to me. Right? Cannot be traced back to me. Pseudonymity is like, there is a way to trace it back to you, but it's very difficult to get to, right? Maybe you need some sort of legal document, like a search order or something like that, a subpoena to be able to unlock those records. But to me, I want there to be some sort of skin in the game from the users if they want to be pseudonymous, because look, what happens with anonymity is it turns dark pretty quickly, right? Suddenly people are doing crimes, people are bullying and doing hate speech, death threats, etc. Right? We saw that on so many apps like After School and other apps like that would come around that people could be anonymous, and next thing you know, they're doing death threats or bomb scares at schools, which shuts down schools. And those are the kind of things that I want a little bit of skin in the game. Now, maybe it doesn't go, so a good example are these laws that the UK are putting around pornography, right? To go to a pornographic website, you have to register with your ID card. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm never going to go to a porn site that makes me show them my ID, right? Because what are they doing with that information? Who are they giving that to? There is no way I would ever do that. But imagine if it was done in a pseudonymous way, that we can assure the company that you are of age, and that's all they get to know. They don't even get to know your birth date, because that's still too much information. They just need to know, are you greater than 18, right? Are you 18 or older? And if they can do that, that's all that's necessary. And that's what's great about decentralized and self-sovereign identity. But to me, you need to have some sort of skin in the game to make this work, to make pseudonymity work. And that means you need to go through a KYC and have that data probably stored in an encrypted vault somewhere that nobody can get access to unless the right government comes a knocking. You control that with a DAO. You have the DAO be on the lookout for any sort of government intervention, et cetera. And then we can release those records as needed. But for me, you got to do the KYC first, and then you start adding the pseudonym on top of it. You do the reputational markers, let the people pick and choose what from LinkedIn or GitHub or HackerRank or wherever else they want. You want to make sure that they can get the information they need, and that they only give out a certain amount of information that cannot be triangulated to determine, oh, this person XYZ is really Ethan, right? We don't want them to be able to do that. And so we're building a system around that. And it just takes time, right? It takes time because you got to onboard a lot of these identity reputation validators. And it just takes a while, but we're building out this network slowly, and we're bringing the folks on board from the Web2 space as well. Look, I hope to get LinkedIn and GitHub and HackerRank and those guys on board, Twitter as well, so we can start pulling down some reputational markers without being able to triangulate who the individual is.
It's kind of a unique challenge you have there with what you're trying to solve with identity. You're right. There has to be skin in the game. I'm kind of like you. I really value my privacy, not for any like, nefarious reasons or anything. I'm not going to do that, but it's just like, I don't know what the ethics of it or the principle of the matter. I remember when I was younger, I went to a private school up to high school, and then, everyone in your class, everybody knows everything about you. Yeah. And then going into a public school where there's like 400 people in my class, it's like, wow, this is great. I can just get lost in the crowd, study what I want. And it was around that same time, that I got the iPhone, internet access became more of it. Social media wasn't really there yet. It was kind of coming online, but we just saw the progression of our identity online, and, our value of just basically, selling ads to us grow to a point where now I don't even know if we're viewed as people anymore. to some of these giant tech companies, you know.
That's right.
So
I would like to say one other thing about pseudonymity and just something I don't understand that's happening right now is that these pseudonymous founders of NFT projects like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, they get doxxed by the media for no reason, right? And it's interesting. The more I talk to mainstream press, like the folks that doxed the Bored Ape Yacht Club founders, it was just a desire to know. Right? There was no reason that they needed to dox those folks, the four founders. They had no cause to do so. They just wanted to know. And when I would talk to press, when I was at NFT NYC talking to the press, they were just like, "Man, we just want to know." It's like, yeah, but why? And they said, "We just wanted to know." It's like, but why? Right? What's the valid purpose? I just want to know. It's like you have kids, right? It's like when the kids like, why? It's the same kind of thing. I just wanted to know the answer, and I never got a good enough answer for me, because to me, you dox people if there's a reason to do that, right? If you really have a valid reason. And the Bored Ape Yacht Club folks, what happened to them when they got doxed? Well, they weren't expecting it. It happened in this article. And they had to quickly, because they actually went to Ape Fest last year, previous Ape Fest, just by themselves, right? Because nobody knew what they looked like, right? Who they were, what they looked like. So they just blended into the crowd, like you were saying, like in high school. And that was awesome for them. This last time, they had to travel with a security detail, because now people who know who they are, they know what they look like, they know where they live. Some of them had to move, so there was no record of where they live. It was just such a serious outlay of cash from their pocket to provide security for themselves. If you look at people like Balaji, he doesn't travel to conferences anymore because people know what he looks like, and he's there's a concern there, a security concern. Anatoly and Raj from Solana, they travel, and their wives travel with security details. It's because people know who they are. If you were pseudonymous and nobody knows who you are, they don't know how much you're worth, how much money you have. That's what's really cool about being a pseudonym. I'm not a pseudonym. I would love to have been. Right? I'm a little late for that, but I think people getting into this space now absolutely should. And there's so many reasons why. And if you just expand that to the blockchain in general, the thing I love about blockchain, other than the Wild West, is the transparent nature of it. Anybody can see the wallet transactions, but also that's a bad thing, right? If somebody gets a large, if everybody's like, Phillip Shoemaker just bought this NFT, they will see which wallet is mine if you just go to Etherscan or whatever block tool you want to use. To me, it's too easy to find that. And that's why I love the concept of these cryptocurrency mixers, Tornado and Blender, right? Which are gone now because they were doing bad stuff. And there's ways to do these things with identity involved that keeps out the nefarious reasons for using the mixers and gives you all the valid reasons to use it. For me, it's just mixing up the transactions so people don't know which wallet is mine, which wallet I use, so people can't track. Imagine if everybody had access to your bank account all the time and be able to just see how much money you have and where you're spending it. I mean, that drives you crazy, right? That kind of stuff. And it's not that I'm doing nefarious things. It's just really nobody else's business. And so there's so many of these things that I think are great about blockchain that are important to have, but at the same time, you want to be able to have a little privacy. And that's what I think pseudonymity gives. That's what I think tying identity into things like cryptocurrency mixers, et cetera, give you. But to me, I want privacy. I want to be able to secure things. I know in an earlier call or earlier podcast, you were talking about all the apps that are on these phones listening to us, right? There's so many of these things in the world that people want to leverage, and blockchain transactions and the transparent nature of it is one of those things that people will manipulate and be able to try to manipulate us into giving them all of our NFTs or cash, right? So I want people to be a pseudonym or be pseudonymous to be able to leverage a lot of this technology to protect themselves. And those are the kind of tools we're creating, and we're creating them in an interesting way. Right now we're entirely on Solana. Right, we built in 2019. We were on Ethereum, but we found with the gas wars and other things that our the prices to run our smart contracts became exorbitant. One smart contract used to cost 5 cents was now over $100. Now, if you know how much it costs to identify someone, it's typically around $1. And so now it's $151 to identify someone. Come on, it's ludicrous. So we went to Solana. We talked to a lot of vendors, et cetera. Ultimately went to Solana because we thought with the rent and other things, it'd be a lot cheaper than Ethereum. And we were very happy with that, right? Obviously, we're on there now. We have a staking protocol so people can, if you want to be a validator in our network, you go on, you stake a certain amount of CVC. We use the Civic token still because we spun out of Civic. So CVC is what we use. They stake that CVC and then they get validated. They become a validator. But we have to do certain checks, right? If you become a validator in our network, it's not like anyone can just become a validator because you're only as good as your weakest link in this case. And for me, if I have a company that starts issuing fraudulent identities, it's game over for the whole network, right? The whole system would break down because you're like, well, I can't trust identity anymore. You could say, hey, I won't trust any identities validated by person X, but that's more difficult, right? It starts to break down the whole system. And I learned a lot about that at Apple, about protecting the brand, because you wanted to make sure that people were happy with the apps they were downloaded, and they didn't get scammed in the process, which is why we did a lot of the work we did. So in this case, I want to be able to get validators on board. I want them to have skin in the game, which is why they stake some currency. And then we put them through SOC 2 compliance and PCI compliance to make sure that when they get your identity, that they delete the records, right? There's no data laying around because, look, the last thing in the world I want are more honeypots created. So I don't want the validators to create honeypots, and I don't want the dApp providers to create honeypots. I just want that data to go and be used. And then once that validator attests to the validity of an identity, they put that on the Solana blockchain. They drop a pass, what's called an identity pass, into your wallet that anyone can query and get information from. And ultimately, you're asked to approve that. They say, hey, this website wants to know if you're over 21 or not. And that might be because you're going to order alcohol or something along those lines. Or maybe it's a gambling website, right? And they want to make sure that you're the right age to be able to gamble, et cetera. And that's the kind of technology we have that just drops a pass into your Web3 wallet. Now, in the future, people are going to be in the metaverse. And the metaverse does not mean a whole new set of laws, right? The metaverse, you're still dictated. The laws are still dictated by where I'm sitting right now, right? In San Diego, I can't gamble. I can't legally gamble in a Nevada casino while I'm here. And so I can't go online and go to a Nevada casino and gamble because it's illegal. I'm not in Nevada. So we're going to, even in the metaverse, if I were to go and transport to a Nevada casino that they've outlaid there and they're doing real money gaming, I can't game there. So identity in the metaverse is important, but we're ultimately tied to where we're sitting, and that's why putting this pass in the wallet, having that wallet accepted by all sorts of different marketplaces or metaverses, and being able to go in there and use your identity as a calling card to be able to get access to the things you want to get access to. There's just so many use cases for what we ultimately do, but the technology is pretty straightforward. You get identified and you get a pass dropped into your wallet, and then that pass can be used to identify yourself wherever it's accepted.
Yeah, very good. I think that well, there's a couple of things there. First of all, I still can't get my head around why David Copperfield would out you. But I guess I'll just leave that one up to be a mystery. You were talking about the consensus mechanism. I like that concept of having validators. So they put up a certain amount of the CVC, and I guess the question is like, how are most people getting involved with staking? What would that look like for them?
Yeah, in this case, these validators, we also call them gatekeepers, and maybe gatekeeper is a better term for this. A gatekeeper stakes a certain amount of currency. They're not providing computing resources. They're not they're not doing like standard validation you would have on the Solana blockchain. What they're doing instead is they're verifying identities, right? So a good example could be the big identity companies in the world, the Onfidos, the Socures, the Jumios, those guys. They could be a validator or a gatekeeper in our network. An identity, PII gets sent to them. So it'd be driver's license, front and back, and then all the data that's pulled off of it. And then they use that in their AI models to compare it with real world data out there to make sure your face matches. Do a face scan to make sure the face of the person that entered this is equivalent to the person that's on the ID, that all the data matches up to public records, et cetera. And then Jumio or Socure in this case, maybe Socure goes back and says, yes, this is a valid ID. And when everything's valid like that, all they're doing is they're providing some sort of resources to validate the identity, but that's all they do. They then delete all that data, send back an attestation. We create a pass that gets dropped into your wallet. So the validating company is validating identities, is essentially what they're doing. And they do it because they make money from it, obviously, and that's great. And we debit that money out of the CVC stake that they're holding. But here's the thing. What if one of those companies starts validating fraudulent IDs, right? They start saying these are valid when they're fraudulent. Well, we need to penalize you, right? There's always a carrot and a stick in marketplaces, right? As with most things. And the carrot is that they'll make money if they validate an ID, and they'll continue to make money. As that ID gets reused over time, they continue to make money. It's not going to be $1, it'll be a penny or something like that. They make a certain percentage over time. So there's a long-lasting carrot here, right? They continue to get paid. As you go to more metaverses and other things, your identity will continue to get used, and that a few pennies will get sent to the company that originally validated it. That's this reusable identity concept that we have, and it's brilliant. It works really well. The problem is if that company validates as valid a fraudulent ID, what do we do at that point? Well, you got to penalize them. You got to take some of that stake, right? There's got to be a certain amount, and we're going to let the DAO decide what that ultimately is. But we need to pull some cash out of there. Every year, when we put them through some sort of compliance review, they have to go get recertified for SOC 2 compliance and PCI compliance. So money will be taken out for that as well. And as long as they stay on the up and up, there'll be no additional cost to that. But what happens when a company validates multiple fraudulent IDs? That's going to be a problem. The thing is as I said, right, that's a weak link, and you got to remove that link as soon as possible. So just penalizing them by taking out some currency is not good enough, because they'll continue doing what they're doing. They might have more vested interest to continue doing it. They might be getting paid more to validate bad IDs. So we have to get rid of those folks in the network. So there's skin in the game, but we want to ultimately be able to shut these folks down if they're doing some bad things. And that's one of the key things about our protocol and our staking protocol, is that we know that we want to be able to take money out for transactions, but it's more important that we make sure everybody's on the up and up and they're doing the right things.
Yeah, there's just a lot of applications that could benefit from what you guys are offering. Do you think that it's more challenging to get different companies on board as an identity verification service, or is it more difficult to get the people, the customers, for lack of a better term, who would need their identity verified, onboarded? You know what I mean? Like, what's the bigger challenge there?
For me, the big challenge is just Web3 ethos, right? I mean, like I say, Web3, people look at this as the Wild West. DEXs, they say, what? We don't want to identify anyone. This is the Wild West. Well, that's the great thing about blockchain and Bitcoin, is that we don't need anyone to trace us and track us. We want to be able to do all these transactions as we want. That's why we're not on the standard financial train, right? We're in the crypto train. And so for me, I get it. Nobody wants to be validated. And that's companies. I mean, that's individuals. And that translates to the decentralized exchanges and dApp providers that are doing this. But we know if we don't self-regulate, if we don't start instituting these things ourselves, the government's going to require us to, and they'll probably be even more onerous than what they want us to do, or what we should be doing now. So with financial transactions, we need to do KYC and AML. That's just the bottom line. That's what needs to happen. And because it's a government requirement for those of us in the US. But, there's hundreds of countries that have also adopted the FATF guidelines, and they will, over time, I believe over the course of the next year, will be requiring travel rules. So PII, personally identifiable information, needs to be transferred along with all these financial transactions. So it's going to happen. But right now, I think the biggest holdout, to be honest, are the people. People do not want to give their identity. And I get it. First of all, it's friction. I mean, imagine if you launch an app and you spend the first 20 minutes just identifying yourself. You're going to delete that app. I mean, come on. If they ask for too much information, I'm gone in minutes. Doesn't make sense. At the App Store, we used to have dating apps. The first time we ever saw a dating app, it asked for a social security number, right? Why do you need a social security number for a dating app? And those are the kind of things you push back on, right? And for me, why do one of these apps, a Web3 app, need to get my personal information? Why do they need to know anything they need to know about? Well, there are certain cases where they do, and that's financial transactions. But everything else, it doesn't matter. They should not ask my name. They shouldn't get any of my birth date. There's so many things they don't need. And they don't even need my email address. They just need my wallet address. And so for me, that's where I want to drop a pseudonym, right? So we create these decentralized identifiers called DIDs and verifiable credentials. And these are these off-chain resources that are validated. And that's what we use. And we make those available on-chain through our gateway protocol. And they shouldn't be asking for anything. If they need a DID or some sort of identifying mechanism, I'll give them a pseudonym, right? And you can have an unlimited number of pseudonyms. It's just you want to be able to control that so they can't vote in a DAO multiple times. They can't get multiple NFTs, et cetera. And we have all the tech to handle this thing. It's just you want people to log in with the data they need. And 99% of the time, they don't need a KYC wallet, right? You don't. Unless you're always doing financial transactions. But for me, getting on the metaverse, they shouldn't have to identify themselves, right? And if they do, maybe it's just a pseudonym, and that's good enough.
Makes me think, because you're right. A lot of people who are in this space don't want to just come outright and identify themselves. But I think we live in a world where you have to be actively trying to stay anonymous. They
Right.
probably have so much of our data that, by going through a service like yours, you're actually kind of taking some of that control back in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
it's almost like a preemptive, bid for your privacy. So
I like
interesting.
I like that. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to follow on that. You're absolutely right. To me, self-sovereign identity and decentralized identity means that I hold on to my keys. I hold on to my identity here. It's not being held in Facebook's database or Google's database. I'm holding on to my identity here. So to me, it's the same as not your keys, not your crypto, right? If you're not holding onto your identity on your own device, if you're not in control of your identity in a self-sovereign way, then it's not your identity anymore. Facebook owns it, right? Facebook owns us, and that's the problem. I don't want any more companies to own me. I'm owned by too many, and so for me, I like the idea of self-sovereign identity because it harkens back to the not your keys, not your crypto. It's the same thing.
Well, I know we're kind of getting close to time here. I really enjoyed talking with you. I hope you'll come back sometime. If there's anything you'd like to leave us with, where people can go to learn more or connect, please do that.
Thanks, Ethan. I really appreciated my time here. It was fun talking to you, and we went all across the board. But yeah, I'd love for people to get involved. For us, it's all about getting onto. I would love to have people read our white paper. It's at identity.com. You can get access to our GitHub there. To everything we create is open source. We encourage everyone to come in and edit, and let's participate in building out the identity future. We have a Discord that's available on our website, etc. Now, we're about to roll out a new website next week. So yeah, give it a look now, but in a week, everything will be updated, much cleaner, easier to find the content. But for me, it's all about getting more developers on the platform and more eyes on our protocol to help us work out the kinks.
Awesome. Well, Phillip Shoemaker, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Ethan. Appreciate it.